How's it going, everybody? Tactard Ted coming to you on the 13th day, lucky number 13th day of June 2020. So, my thought for today is expectations versus reality. Because there seems to be a lot of expectations being reported in the news, being reported by the so-called experts about the war in Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. And how does that shape up with reality? Now, if you listen to the narrative will tell you that the Russian people are terribly upset with Putin. They're terribly upset because of the war in Ukraine, and they will remove Putin. They will have a civil uprising. The mothers of all the dead Russian soldiers will descend upon Putin like avenging angels and drive him from office. So let me tell you the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is Russians are a little upset with Putin. They're upset for two reasons, and they're not the reasons you're being told. They're upset that he did not go into Ukraine 8 years ago. They're upset that it took this long to invade Ukraine and straighten out the mess. And a lot of people were pissed off because they said it would have saved a lot of innocent lives in Donbass. That's what people were upset with Putin about. They're not upset that he went in. They're upset that it took him till 2022 to go in. The other thing they're upset about is that Putin has not razed to the ground Kiev and Lvov. That's what they're upset about. They're upset that they haven't turned those two cities into Grozny 2.0. Now, I can't help you if you don't know what Grozny is. You might want to go up and look up Chechen Wars 1 and 2. You might want to take a look at what was done to the capital of Chechnya, Grozny. Grozny was pretty much trashed, razed. It looked a lot like Mariupol, and if you don't want to know what Mariupol looked like, then I really can't help you. They're mad that they haven't just totally trashed those two cities. And to be honest, the longer that the increased shelling that started 2 days ago in Donetsk, the Ukrainians are dumping all sorts of ordnance on the city of Donetsk. There is no military in Donetsk. There is no military significance to Donetsk. It's just a lot of civilians, and the Ukrainians are intent upon terror bombing via artillery this town. Now, that's something you don't do. That's aggressive warfare. That's actually illegal according to the Geneva Convention. But guess what, folks? The Ukrainians, not the Russians, that's the other expectation, that the Russians are doing tons and tons and tons of terrible things, which now even one of the main protagonists that was putting these stories about Russian violence, Russian rape, Russian this, Russian that, Russian insert dirty word or dirty action here, that lady's been fired and now admits that a lot of what she said was BS, but it was put out there to ensure that Ukraine got the help it needed. So basically, folks, there you go. The support for Ukraine is based on lies. Lies, folks, lies. You know, we used to hate lies, but now the Ghost of Kiev, the great lie of that's great. The great lie of Snake Island. This whole war has been based on a lie. And when it's over, I doubt that it'll happen, but I would really love to see the American people find out how much they've been lied to. And I've been telling you folks you've been lied to. Now, there's a lot of you folks that don't want to believe it for one reason or another, and that's fine. You don't have to believe me. I'm not wrapped up in being believed. I'm telling you, I've got a clear conscience. I don't get upset by any of it. I don't have a guilty conscience about anything that I'm saying. I know that what I'm saying is honest. I know what I'm saying is not driven politically. Although you may think it is, but it's not. It's based in reality. So it's interesting. I'd love to see how we've all been lied to with these expectations we put up. The expectation that the Ukrainians are going to be victorious. It's not happening, folks. I listened to a blogger on YouTube. Seems like a good guy. He was an airline pilot, a Ukrainian guy who lost his job because of all this, and he's given an update from what he's getting from the Ukrainian general staff, and I was surprised by how much optimism this guy still had. He said, okay, we've got bad news on the front here, but we're doing it down south. We are going to retake Kherson. We are going to do this. We've got them. It's just a matter of time. And then he said something which kind of shocked me, that he had part of the puzzle and he didn't understand it. He said, that would be our first victory. Now, I want you to dwell on that. We've been told that the Ukrainians are winning. The Ukrainians are winning. They have not retaken a major lost town or city. The villages bounce back and forth depending on the Russian needs, depending on what the Russians are doing. These towns are all over the place, these so-called villages. And they bounce through them. They're looking to push forward, and they're looking for weak spots. The Russians are doing this warfare very, very smartly. I've learned a few new terms, which was interesting about watching. When the Russians make an advance and they've got a bulge out into the lines, at the end of that bulge, they have what they call sviti, or flower. And the flower is like a flower, it blooms. In other words, they set off attacks in a bunch of different directions like flower petals. And what they're looking for that next weak spot to exploit. They aren't doing what we would traditionally think of as Soviet tactics. They're just not sledgehammering everything. They had to do that in Mariupol. The way Mariupol was set up, the way it was defended, they had to do the sledgehammer, the slow, steady grind, which plays havoc on troops, equipment, civilians, and it does play havoc on the enemy. The enemy ended up hiding in Azovstal. And they were trying to do that with Severodonetsk. They had a factory, the Azot chemical factory, and they took refuge in there, but it didn't have the same deep bunkers that Azovstal had. And after about 2-3 days of getting laid into by artillery, the civilians, whether they were hostages and managed to escape, or they were civilians who took refuge with the Ukrainian army, about 250 of them left. They said they'd had enough. Now, whether they escaped or whether they left of their own free will and weren't hostages, we don't know. But this guy is going through the motions, talking about everything, and he's optimistic, although he'll admit in the end that Ukraine has not won a single battle yet. But the Battle of Kiev, yes, the Battle of Kiev. Did the Russians actually take Kiev? No, and they only put a low number of troops against Kiev. They no military strategist I know who is worth his salt would think that you're going to take a city that large with that low number of troops. It's just not possible, unless the entire garrison just said, hey, yep, come on in, guys, have at it. Like the Nazi garrison laying down in Paris. That would be the only thing equivalent to it, but they're not going to give up Kiev like that. The expectations are not matching the reality. We have the same thing going on in this country. We have the so-called January 6th hearings about the January 6th protests that they're calling insurrection, right? Do you know what people in the United States are really upset about? Especially when they're paying, in some places, $8 for a gallon of gas. They're upset that January 6th wasn't a real insurrection. They're now upset that those people didn't actually go in and flip the government. That's what they're worried about. That's what they're upset about. They're not upset that a bunch of people went in there, broke windows, and scared a few elected officials. No. They're upset that these people didn't actually go in and flip the government. And that's the reality versus your expectations. And I don't think, number one, our government is prepared for the reality. I don't think the press would dare report the reality. It's just like the expectations. They're expecting you to believe that the gas problems in this country right now are due to Vladimir Putin, when everybody in this country understands that this is Joe Biden, that the gas prices were already starting higher under Biden. And then Biden's meddling in Ukraine has only made the situation worse. So the expectation that we were going to buy this is Putin's tax, Putin's price hike, it's all nonsense. Everybody knows better. Everybody knows better. The only folks that don't know better are leftists who are devoutly left, and they're going to support Joe Biden no matter what. And the Republicans who don't really think. The Republican useful idiots, the ones who are, because it's Russia, 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 and they still haven't got over their Cold War butthurt, are going to support Joe Biden without knowing they're supporting Joe Biden. They're going to give Joe Biden all the support they need just because, hey, it's Russia. I got news for you, and I've said this before. The enemy is not in Moscow. The enemy is in D.C. The enemy are the folks who want to take away your rights. The enemy are the people who want to force you away from oil. They want to force you into their battery cars. Why? Because they control the electric grid. You know, the internal combustion engine is one of the greatest advances of mankind. It's done so many things. It's built this nation. Oil has built this nation. With transport, we're not like Europe. We're not tied to electric railways like they are in Ukraine. We're not tied to tough public transportation like much of Europe. You want to understand one of the major differences, go live in a place like Russia where everything, you know, it's getting away from it, but where just about 80% of the people are heavily reliant on public transportation. And the public transportation, I've got to admit it to them, is really well developed and really well defined compared to here. But we also don't live in villages like everywhere else. You know, it's totally fine, you know, on a 15-mile stretch of highway between two towns, that all along that highway you've got individual houses out there. We're not grouping together. We don't feel that we have to group together. And you know, I think a lot of folks don't understand how uniquely American we are. And surely the government doesn't understand it, because they want to take away part of that mobility. They have the expectation that they can force us into cities, and that they can force us to use the mode of transportation that they want to use, which is the electric car. You know, really where I live, let's face it, we have a coal-fired electric plant. So that means if I go out tomorrow and buy a Tesla, my Tesla is coal-fired. It takes the energy from a power grid that is made by burning of coal. You know, this is what folks don't understand, is that your electricity comes from places, and it isn't necessarily clean fuel. Now, I will tell you what, the best thing that we could do is go for nuclear power, and I still believe that. But Dave, Chernobyl. Yes, Chernobyl. I get it. Chernobyl, 40-year-old technology that was flawed when it was designed. Modern nuclear reactors are not like Chernobyl, and the safety precautions that we have are not like Chernobyl. Nuclear power is the future if you want a clean, affordable energy that does not release carbons into the air. Now, I will be the first to tell you, I am not a big green person. And you can call me all you want, that's fine. I believe you can burn trash. I believe you can do all these things. The big secret is, if living in the United States, I don't think you exactly understand how clean we have it. You don't understand how nice everything is. I've rode a train working along the steppe in Kazakhstan, and I watched people just throw their trash and waste off the rails. And along the rail, the tracks, there is trash everywhere, where it's the same drill, and every time you come through, you throw your water bottle, you throw this off, you throw that off, and you defecate off the edge of the train. Nothing new there, folks. Nothing new there. What I'm trying to tell you, folks, is we are not a major polluter. You want to see the major polluters? Countries like India, China, Poland are major producers of a lot of the airborne pollution. And they also pollute their waterways. And you're going to get upset because we like to drive cars. We like to drive cars. I don't hear all the talks about smog like we used to have it in the cities in the 70s. No, you can find these sort of things in Beijing. You can find these things in a lot of European capitals certain times of the year. You don't see it here in the United States anymore. And a lot of it's because we've cleaned up our act. We're a little more conscious of everything. But when you get right down to it, folks, we're not a polluter. We're not. And there are a lot of countries who look to us to clean up the mess, and it's a mess they've made. So that's another expectation versus reality. The expectation is we're terrible people who pollute everything, and we're to blame for the pollution, when in reality, we're not even close to being one of the worst polluters. There are other places that pollute far more than we do and are doing far more damage to the ecosystem. But the expectation by the press is you're going to believe what they tell you. You're going to believe what they tell you, and there's no reason not to believe it. So with all that, it's really interesting, folks, that the expectations are not matching the realities. I'll give you a little expectation versus reality. My expectation, we'll see how the real world comes out. I expect either monkeypox to rear its head, because that seems to be bubbling slowly under the surface. It's gaining a little bit of momentum. Or the brand new variant of COVID to require mail-in balloting this election. Because I'll be quite honest, that's the only way a lot of these incumbents, especially Democrat incumbents, are going to be able to stay in power, is by fraud. That's the only way they're going to be able to stay in power. And that's all right, folks, because we need to establish mail-in voting. We need to do that so that the corrupt individuals who hold power now can continue to hold power later. And once again, I will remind you that you need to frame the narrative. When you've got your leftist or your Republican misguided, useful idiot coming to you and starts preaching about mail-in balloting and all that happiness and how there's no fraud with it. Very simple. If mail-in balloting, there's no risk of fraud, then we demand mail order guns. I should be able to purchase a firearm through the mail. And not just any firearm, machine guns. I should be able to buy those through the mail because there'd be no fraud. I can still do the paperwork with the ATF. I can still do all that shit. And I should be able to buy that through the mail. There's no reason, because there's no fraud in mail order stuff. There's no fraud in anything done through the mail. It's happy. It's great. It's beautiful. Mail order guns. I mean, these people are proving it. They say that there's no fraud through mail elections. So we should be able to have the mail order guns. Anyhow, folks, that's enough ranting for me. I went way over my time, but there we are. So you guys have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later.